The training grounds of the Galactic Defense Academy buzzed with activity as recruits from dozens of species practiced their marksmanship skills. The sound of energy weapons firing echoed across the metal platforms, each shot monitored by floating sensor drones that calculated accuracy to the nearest millimeter. Sarah Chen crouched behind her assigned firing position, her human hands trembling slightly as she gripped the standard-issue plasma rifle. Around her, the other recruits moved with fluid precision. The Velkari warriors, with their forearms and natural hunting instincts, fired in perfect rhythm. The crystal injector beings calculated wind patterns and atmospheric pressure with mathematical certainty. Even the insected hive minds shared targeting data among their collective consciousness. And then there was Sarah, missing shot after shot. "Pathetic," hissed Zekthal, a towering Velkari with scarred chitin and predatory yellow eyes. "How did this soft skin even pass the entrance exams?" Sarah tried to ignore the comment, focusing on her breathing like the instructors taught. She lined up the sights, squeezed the trigger gently, and watched as her plasma bolt sailed wide of the target yet again. The holographic display showed her accuracy rating in harsh red numbers, 12%. Commander Thaxian, the Academy's Velkari drill instructor, stomped over with his heavy boots clanking against the metal floor. His forearms gestured dismissively at Sarah's target. "Recruit Chen, in my 3 centuries of training warriors, I have never seen such consistently poor performance. Perhaps humans should stick to support roles." Laughter rippled through the nearby firing positions. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks but forced herself to stand straight. She had worked too hard to get here, scored too high on every other test, to let marksmanship end her dream of joining the elite Galactic Rangers. "Sir, I request additional practice time," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Practice?" Zekthal's mandibles clicked in amusement. "You cannot teach instinct to a species that hunted with sticks and rocks while we conquered star systems. Some beings are simply born without the gift." The other recruits nodded in agreement. The Jector made harmonic sounds that translated as agreement through their universal translators. Even some of the humans from the military colonies looked uncomfortable, as if Sarah's failure reflected poorly on their entire species. Sarah's grip tightened on the rifle. She had heard variations of this speech her entire life. Too slow for competitive sports, too small for heavy labor, too weak for military service. But she had pushed through every barrier, earned her engineering degree, and scored in the 99th percentile on tactical analysis exams. "Perhaps," came a quiet voice from behind the group, "the issue is not the recruit's ability, but the weapon she's been given." Everyone turned to see a figure approaching from the shadows of the equipment storage area. He was human, but unlike any soldier Sarah had ever seen. Tall and lean, with silver hair and weathered skin that spoke of decades under alien suns. Most striking were his eyes, pale blue and incredibly steady, as if they had measured distances across countless battlefields. "Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Cole," Commander Thaxian said, his tone shifting to something approaching respect. "I did not expect to see you in the training sections." "Just observing the new recruits," Cole replied smoothly. His gaze settled on Sarah with quiet intensity. "Mind if I take a look at her form?" Thaxian's 4 arms spread in a gesture of permission. "By all means, Sergeant, though I fear you will find her case hopeless." Cole stepped up beside Sarah, ignoring the curious stares from the other recruits. He was close enough that she could smell the metallic scent of weapon oil and something else, something that reminded her of thunderstorms. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her rifle. Sarah handed over the plasma weapon, watching as Cole examined it with practiced efficiency. His hands moved over the weapon's surfaces, checking balance points and sight alignment with movements too quick to follow. "Standard-issue plasma rifle," he said after a moment. "Designed by committee built for average physiology across 17 different species." He looked at Sarah directly. "What's your dominant eye?" "Right," she answered, confused by the seemingly simple question. "And your natural shooting stance?" Sarah demonstrated, falling into the position that felt most comfortable. Cole nodded thoughtfully. "The problem," he said loud enough for the others to hear, "is that this weapon was designed for beings with different limb lengths, different eye spacing, and different neural response patterns. A Velkari's natural hunting instincts work well with the standard grip and sight picture. A human's precision muscle control and pattern recognition work differently." Zekthal clicked his mandibles dismissively. "Excuses. A true warrior adapts to any weapon. Cole's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Is that so? Then perhaps you'd like to demonstrate your adaptability with this. From seemingly nowhere, Cole produced a sleek black rifle unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. It was clearly of human design, with clean lines and what looked like traditional optical scopes rather than holographic sights. Projectile weapon, Zechthel said with obvious disdain. Primitive technology, we abandoned such crude tools millennia ago. Humor me, Cole said, offering the weapon to the Velkari warrior. Zechthel took the rifle with two of his four hands, clearly struggling with the unfamiliar grip. He raised it toward the targets, his movements awkward and uncertain. When he fired, the kinetic round went wide by several meters. The weapon is defective, he declared, handing it back. Actually, Cole said, that was a perfect shot for someone using a weapon designed for a completely different species. The trigger pull, grip angle, and sight picture were all wrong for your physiology, just like the plasma rifle is wrong for hers. He turned back to Sarah. The question isn't whether you can shoot, Recruit Chen. The question is whether you want to learn how to shoot like a human instead of like everyone else. Sarah felt something spark inside her chest. For the first time since arriving at the academy, someone wasn't telling her to change herself to fit the standard. They were suggesting the standard might be wrong. I want to learn, she said. Cole nodded once, a gesture that somehow felt like a contract being signed. Meet me at range 7 after evening mess. Bring your gear. As he walked away, the other recruits erupted in whispers. Zechthel's yellow eyes narrowed with suspicion. That human is trouble, he muttered. Mark my words, his methods will only make her failure more spectacular. But Sarah barely heard the comments. She was thinking about the way Cole had held that black rifle, the casual confidence in his movements, and the promise in his words. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt something that had been absent for weeks. Hope. The rest of the training day passed in a blur of tactical exercises and classroom instruction. Sarah struggled through close-quarters combat drills where her smaller size put her at a disadvantage against the larger alien recruits. She fumbled through equipment maintenance where the tools designed for various species appendages felt awkward in her human hands. But through it all, she kept thinking about Range 7 and the strange human instructor who had seen something in her that no one else had noticed. As evening approached and the academy's artificial lighting shifted to simulate sunset, Sarah made her way through the corridors toward the designated meeting point. Range 7 was in an older section of the facility, away from the main training areas where recruits usually practiced. She found Cole waiting for her, standing beside a table covered with various weapons and equipment. In the dimmer lighting, he looked even more weathered, like a piece of machinery that had been tested beyond its design limits but had never broken. You came, he said without surprise. Yes, sir. Don't call me sir, I work for a living. His mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. And out here, we're just two humans trying to figure out how to make you dangerous. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Dangerous. Not adequate, not acceptable, but dangerous. It was a word that had never been applied to her before. Cole picked up the black rifle from earlier, handling it with the reverence other beings might show a religious artifact. This is an M40 sniper system. Human-designed, human-manufactured, and optimized for human physiology and psychology. Your people have been perfecting this particular approach to warfare for over 2,000 years. He handed her the weapon, and immediately Sarah noticed the difference. The weight distribution felt natural in her hands. The grip seemed designed for her palm, the stock length perfect for her arm span. The other species mock projectile weapons as primitive, Cole continued, but they're missing the point. Energy weapons are about raw power and rate of fire. Projectile weapons are about precision and understanding. They require you to calculate distance, wind, humidity, temperature, and a dozen other variables. They demand that you become one with the physics of your environment. Sarah raised the rifle and looked through the scope. The view was incredibly clear, with crosshairs that seemed to naturally draw her eye to the center. Why are you helping me? She asked. Cole was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. Because 20 years ago, I was the only human in my unit. Because I've seen what happens when people like us try to fight like everyone else instead of fighting like ourselves. And because the galaxy is about to face something that will require every advantage we can get. Something in his tone made Sarah lower the rifle and look at him directly. What do you mean? That's for later. Right now, we focus on making you into what you were meant to be. He gestured toward the far end of the range, where targets had been set up at various distances. Show me what you can do with a weapon designed for human hands. Sarah raised the rifle again, feeling the solid weight of it against her shoulder. She lined up the crosshairs with the nearest target and gently squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out with a sharp crack that echoed off the walls. Downrange, she saw a small hole appear dead center in the target. Cole nodded approvingly. Not bad, now let's see what you can really do. 3 weeks of secret training had transformed Sarah in ways she hadn't thought possible. Every evening after regular academy instruction, she met Cole at range 7. What started as basic marksmanship had evolved into something far more complex and deadly. Breathing is everything, Cole had told her on the second night as she lay prone behind the rifle. Your heartbeat, your pulse, the micro-movements of your muscles. Learn to fire between heartbeats in the natural pause of your respiratory cycle. Now Sarah could put 5 rounds through the same hole at 300 meters. Her plasma rifle scores had improved dramatically too, as the principles Cole taught translated across weapon systems. But more importantly, something fundamental had changed in how she moved through the academy. The other recruits had begun to notice. There's something different about the human, Zekthal muttered to his Velkari companions during morning weapons inspection. His yellow eyes tracked Sarah as she efficiently field-stripped her assigned rifle with movements that had become precise and economical. She moves like a predator now. Sarah heard the comment but didn't react. Cole had taught her that too. Never let them see you care about their opinions, he had said. Let your actions speak. Make them wonder what you're thinking instead of telling them. Commander Thaxian noticed the change as well. During that morning's tactical exercise, he watched Sarah navigate the urban combat simulation with new purpose. Where she had once hesitated and second-guessed herself, she now moved with calculated precision, using cover effectively and choosing firing positions that maximized her advantages. Recruit Chen, Thaxian called out as the exercise concluded. Remain after dismissal. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Had someone seen her evening training sessions, were her improved scores raising suspicions? After the other recruits filed out, Thaxian approached with his characteristic heavy footsteps. His forearms were crossed in a gesture Sarah had learned to interpret as either deep thought or barely controlled annoyance. Your performance has improved significantly in recent weeks, he said without preamble. Your accuracy scores have jumped from 12% to 78%. Your tactical decision-making shows marked improvement. Either you have been hiding your true abilities, or someone has been providing additional instruction. Sarah kept her expression neutral, remembering Cole's lessons about information control. I've been practicing during off-duty hours, sir. Practicing with what? The standard weapons are secured in the armory after training hours. Dry fire exercises, sir. Mental rehearsal, studying tactical manuals. It wasn't technically a lie, though it wasn't the complete truth either. Thaxian's compound eyes studied her for several long moments. The Velkari's ability to read microexpressions was legendary, but Sarah had learned to control those too. There are rumors, Thaxian said slowly, of an old human instructor who occasionally takes interest in struggling recruits, someone who operates outside normal channels. Sarah said nothing, maintaining eye contact without challenging posture. If such a person were providing unauthorized training, the commander continued, it would be highly irregular, potentially grounds for disciplinary action. He paused. However, results are difficult to argue with. Continue your improvement, Recruit Chen, but be aware that exceptional performance draws attention and not all attention is welcome. After dismissal, Sarah made her way through the academy's corridors with a new awareness of being watched. Several instructors tracked her movement with calculating gazes. Groups of alien recruits stopped their conversations when she passed. The improvement she had worked so hard to achieve was becoming a liability. That evening, she arrived at range 7 to find Cole cleaning a rifle she hadn't seen before. This one was even sleeker than the M40, with an integrated scope and what appeared to be some kind of environmental sensor package. We need to talk, he said without looking up from his work. Thaxian suspects something. More than suspects. He's been asking questions about my presence in the training areas. Cole set down his cleaning rod and fixed her with that steady blue gaze. "How do you feel about taking your training somewhere else?" "What do you mean?" Instead of answering directly, Cole activated a holographic display that materialized above the table. The image showed a star map with several systems highlighted in red. 3 months ago, long-range scouts detected unusual activity in the Outer Rim territories. Ships moving in formation, energy signatures that don't match any known technology, and communication patterns that suggest a large, organized force. Sarah studied the display, her analytical mind automatically processing the tactical implications. Invasion fleet. That's the working theory. The Galactic Council has been quietly mobilizing defense forces, but they're preparing to fight the last war, not the next one. Mass formations, traditional energy weapon exchanges, the kind of battle doctrine that's worked for the past 500 years. Cole manipulated the display, zooming in on sensor readings that showed scattered debris fields and radiation signatures. But look at these battle sites. No debris patterns consistent with standard ship-to-ship combat. No residual energy signatures from plasma or particle beam weapons. Whatever hit these outposts used something different, something that left very little trace. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of weapon leaves no trace? Kinetic penetrators fired from extreme range. Solid projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. Simple physics, devastating effectiveness, and almost impossible to defend against if you don't see them coming. The implications hit her like a physical blow. They fight like humans. More accurately, they fight like humans would if we'd had another 1,000 years to perfect the art of long-range precision warfare. Cole's expression was grim. The Council's strategic planners are preparing for close-range energy weapon exchanges. They're going to be slaughtered. Sarah stared at the holographic display, her mind racing through tactical scenarios. Standard galactic doctrine emphasized shields, energy absorption, and close-range firepower. Against an enemy that could engage from beyond visual range with weapons that bypassed energy defenses, traditional formations would be death traps. You think they need human tactics to win? I think they need human minds to even understand what they're facing. But more than that, they need humans who can think and fight like snipers on a galactic scale. Individuals who can operate independently, assess threats from minimal information, and eliminate targets from impossible distances. Cole stood and walked to a wall panel, entering a security code that revealed a hidden storage compartment. Inside were weapons and equipment Sarah had never seen before, along with data chips and what appeared to be military orders. "I'm being recalled to active duty," he said. "Special operations behind enemy lines, the kind of mission where you go in alone and might not come back." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What about my training?" "That depends." Cole turned back to her, his expression serious. "There are 2 paths in front of you. You can finish your academy training, graduate with acceptable scores, and probably get assigned to a support unit where your analytical skills will be appreciated. Safe, respectable, and ultimately meaningless when the shooting starts." He gestured toward the hidden equipment. "Or you can come with me. Accelerated training under combat conditions, no safety nets, and a very good chance of dying in some unnamed system fighting an enemy we barely understand." Sarah looked from Cole to the weapons to the star map still glowing above the table. Every rational part of her mind screamed that the first option was the sensible choice. She had already exceeded everyone's expectations just by surviving academy training this long. But then she thought about Zekthal's dismissive comments, about Thaxian's barely concealed contempt, about a lifetime of being told she wasn't strong enough, fast enough, or good enough. She thought about an unknown enemy that might destroy everything simply because the galaxy's defenders were preparing for the wrong kind of war. "If I come with you," she said slowly, "what exactly would my role be?" Cole's mouth quirked in that almost smile she had learned to recognize. "Apprentice sniper, student of warfare, and eventually, if you survive long enough, someone who can put a bullet through a target from distances that shouldn't be possible." "How do we leave without raising suspicions?" "We don't leave, you wash out." Sarah blinked in confusion. "What?" "Tomorrow morning, you're going to have a very public argument with Thaxian. You're going to demonstrate the kind of attitude problem that gets recruits dismissed from the academy. Insubordination, failure to follow orders, maybe a spectacular training accident that calls your psychological fitness into question. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. Rather than trying to sneak away or make excuses, they would engineer her dismissal in a way that made everyone glad to see her go. "Can you do it?" Cole asked. "Can you make them believe you're the failure they always thought you were?" Sarah thought about the weeks of secret training, the hours of practice that had transformed her from a struggling recruit into something dangerous. She thought about the galaxy-spanning war that was coming, and the chance to use skills no one else understood against an enemy no one else could fight. "Yes," she said, "I can do it." Cole nodded approvingly. "Good, because after tomorrow there's no going back. Once you're dismissed from the academy, Sarah Chen, the failed recruit, will cease to exist. What emerges will be something else entirely." As if summoned by his words, an alarm began sounding throughout the academy complex. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as automated announcements echoed through the facility. "All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to emergency stations." Cole's expression hardened as he moved to the wall display and activated the Academy's communication system. The main screen filled with the image of Admiral Korthak, the Velkari military commander responsible for sector defense. "Long-range sensors have detected multiple contacts entering the outer system." The Admiral's voice was tight with controlled urgency. "Configuration and approach vectors suggest hostile intent. All Academy personnel will prepare for possible evacuation. This facility may be in the path of enemy advance forces." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. "They're here." "Ahead of schedule," Cole muttered, his hands already moving to secure the specialized equipment. "Change of plans. We don't have time for elaborate deception." He tossed her a military-grade combat suit along with equipment harnesses she didn't recognize. "Get suited up. Your real education starts now." As Sarah struggled into the unfamiliar gear, she caught Cole's reflection in the black scope of the sniper rifle. For the first time since she had known him, he looked genuinely concerned. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. Sarah thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The years of being underestimated, the weeks of secret training, the growing confidence that she could be more than anyone expected. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I'm tired of being called hopeless." Cole's almost smile appeared one more time. "Good enough, let's go prove them wrong." The evacuation of Galactic Defense Academy had begun in earnest when Sarah and Cole emerged from Range 7. Students and instructors moved through the corridors in organized chaos, carrying essential equipment toward the transport bays. The Academy's defensive systems hummed to life, energy barriers and automated weapon systems preparing for possible assault. Sarah barely recognized herself in the combat gear Cole had provided. The suit was human-designed, optimized for mobility and sensor integration rather than the heavy armor favored by other species. Her movements felt fluid and natural in a way the Academy's standard equipment never had. "Stay close and look like you know what you're doing," Cole instructed as they joined the flow of personnel. "We need to reach the armory before they lock down the heavy weapons." They moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency, Cole's presence somehow creating a bubble of authority that discouraged questions. Sarah noticed how other Academy staff deferred to him automatically, even though his rank insignia were minimal. There was something about his bearing that spoke of experience and competence in ways that formal hierarchy couldn't match. Commander Thaxian's voice echoed through the corridor speakers. "All combat-rated personnel to defensive positions. Academy Defense Protocol 7 is now in effect. Non-essential personnel continue evacuation procedures." "Are we combat-rated?" Sarah asked quietly. "You are now," Cole replied, leading her down a side corridor she hadn't known existed. "Emergency protocols supersede normal classification requirements. Besides, by the time anyone thinks to check credentials, we'll either be dead or the bureaucracy will have other concerns." They reached the armory to find it bustling with activity. Velkari weapons specialists distributed energy rifles and defensive equipment to Academy staff, their forearms moving with mechanical efficiency. Sarah watched as her former classmates received standard plasma weapons and generic tactical gear, the same equipment that had made her feel clumsy and inadequate for weeks. Cole approached the senior armorer with casual confidence. "Special Operations Requisition. Priority 7 clearance. The Velkari looked up from his distribution list, compound eyes scanning Cole's identification. I have no record of special operations personnel on Academy roster. Check your emergency protocols, Sergeant. External consultants operating under emergency authority. Sarah held her breath as the armorer's claws clicked against his data pad. Emergency situations created confusion, and Cole was exploiting that uncertainty with surgical precision. Authorized, the armorer finally said. What equipment do you require? 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself equipped with weapons and gear she couldn't have imagined having access to during normal Academy operations. In addition to the M40 sniper system, she carried advanced sensors, communication equipment, and ammunition that Cole described as specialty rounds for specialty problems. The weight should have been overwhelming, but the human-designed gear distributed load efficiently across her frame. More importantly, every piece of equipment felt purposeful rather than burdensome. Where exactly are we going? She asked as they made their way toward the Academy's observation deck. Up, Cole replied. I want to see what we're dealing with before we make any tactical commitments. The observation deck offered a panoramic view of the system's outer approaches, where long-range sensors had detected the unknown contacts. Most Academy personnel were focused on evacuation procedures, but Cole led Sarah to a series of advanced telescopic displays that offered detailed imaging of distant space. What they saw made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The approaching fleet was unlike anything in her tactical studies. Instead of the massive energy-shielded battleships favored by galactic military doctrine, these ships were lean and angular, their surfaces dark and non-reflective. They moved in loose formations that maximized maneuverability while maintaining overlapping fields of fire. Stealth configuration, Cole muttered, adjusting the display controls. Minimal energy signatures, maximum sensor absorption. They're not trying to intimidate anyone. They're trying to get close without being detected until the last possible moment. Sarah studied the tactical disposition with growing alarm. Those aren't assault ships, they're sniper platforms. Exactly. They're going to engage from maximum range with kinetic weapons, probably accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. By the time anyone realizes they're under attack, the projectiles will already be inbound. As if to confirm his assessment, the communication system crackled to life with Admiral Korthak's increasingly urgent voice. Unknown vessels, you are entering galactic defense space. Identify yourself and state your intentions. The response came not in words, but in action. The display screens suddenly lit up with new contacts, tiny objects separating from the main fleet and accelerating toward the inner system at velocities that made Sarah's engineering-trained mind reel. Projectile launch detected, came the automated warning. Impact in approximately 18 minutes. Cole was already moving, gathering equipment with practiced efficiency. Time to go. This facility is about to become a very unhealthy place to be. Where? Sarah asked, following him toward the emergency exits. Away from here. That first salvo is going to be targeted at military infrastructure. Command centers, communication arrays, weapons platforms. They want to blind and deafen the defenders before the main assault. They made their way through corridors that were now filled with genuine panic rather than organized evacuation. The reality of incoming kinetic projectiles had finally penetrated the command structure, and orders were being issued with increasingly desperate urgency. Sarah noticed Cole navigating through the chaos with a sense of direction that suggested he had planned this route in advance. He led her through maintenance passages and service corridors that bypassed the main evacuation flow, moving toward what appeared to be a private hangar bay. You had this planned, she realized. I had contingencies, part of the job. Cole paused at a security checkpoint, producing authorization codes that opened blast doors without question. The moment those long-range sensor reports came in, I knew we'd need an independent exit strategy. The hangar bay contained a single ship that Sarah had never seen before. It was clearly of human design, but unlike the utilitarian military vessels she was familiar with. This ship was built for stealth and speed, its angular surfaces designed to minimize sensor detection. Reconnaissance craft, Cole explained as they boarded. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's how special operations personnel get to places they're not supposed to be. As the ship's systems came online, Sarah strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat and watched Cole's hands move across controls with familiar expertise. Outside, she could see other evacuation ships launching from the Academy's main bays, their courses taking them toward the inner system and presumably safety. Cole took a different approach, angling their ship toward the outer system and the approaching enemy fleet. "We're going toward them?" Sarah asked. "Best place to observe enemy capabilities is from close range. Besides, everyone else is running away. Who's going to notice one small ship heading in the wrong direction?" The logic was sound, but Sarah felt her pulse quicken as their ship accelerated toward what was essentially certain death if they were detected. Through the viewports, she could see the distant sparkle of the enemy fleet, growing slowly larger as they approached. "Projectile impact in 6 minutes," the ship's computer announced. "Academy facilities targeted for destruction." Cole activated a series of displays that showed real-time tactical analysis of the approaching projectiles. The kinetic weapons were masterpieces of engineering, each one guided by sophisticated targeting systems and moving fast enough to penetrate any known defensive barrier. "Watch and learn," he said quietly. "This is how you fight a war when energy weapons and shields become obsolete. Pure kinetic energy, delivered with surgical precision from ranges that make retaliation impossible." Sarah watched in fascinated horror as the projectiles reached their targets. The Academy's defensive systems, designed to intercept energy weapons and explosive missiles, were useless against solid metal moving at relativistic speeds. The impacts were brief flashes of light followed by expanding clouds of debris. In less than 30 seconds, the most advanced military training facility in the sector had been reduced to scrap metal and radioactive gas. "My God," Sarah whispered. "Now you understand why conventional tactics won't work," Cole said grimly. "Those ships can engage targets from outside visual range with weapons that ignore all standard defenses. Every major military installation in the galaxy is just as vulnerable." Their ship had reached the outer edge of the system, close enough to the enemy fleet to make detailed observations, but far enough away to avoid immediate detection. Cole activated passive sensors that painted a detailed picture of enemy capabilities. 57 ships in the main formation," he reported, "each one carrying what appears to be dozens of kinetic launch tubes. They're not here to conquer territory. They're here to eliminate military resistance as quickly and efficiently as possible." Sarah studied the tactical display with growing understanding of the strategic situation. "It's a systematic approach. Destroy command and control infrastructure first, then eliminate defensive platforms, then deal with individual ships that can't coordinate their response." "Exactly, and it's working perfectly because everyone trained to fight these battles is thinking in terms of energy weapon exchanges and shield penetration algorithms." Cole's expression was grim. "The Galactic Defense Force is going to get slaughtered unless someone can figure out how to fight back." "Can we fight back?" Sarah asked. "Not with standard doctrine, but maybe with the right approach, the right weapons, and the right mindset." Cole looked at her directly. "Are you ready to find out what a human sniper can do on a galactic battlefield?" Sarah thought about the academy she had just watched die, about the classmates and instructors who might have been killed in those brief flashes of light. She thought about Zekthol's dismissive comments and Thaxian's barely concealed contempt. Most of all, she thought about the enemy fleet methodically destroying everything she had worked to become a part of. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." Cole nodded once and began plotting a course toward the inner system, where the main battle was about to begin. "Then let's go show them what humanity brings to this fight." The battle for the inner system had already begun by the time Cole and Sarah arrived at the coordinates where the Galactic Defense Fleet had established their formation. What they found was a massacre unfolding in slow motion across millions of kilometers of space. Admiral Korthak's battle group consisted of 12 heavy cruisers and 36 escort vessels, arranged in the traditional defensive formation that had served galactic civilization for centuries. Overlapping energy shields, coordinated point defense systems, and devastating close-range firepower that could vaporize smaller ships in seconds. None of it mattered against an enemy that refused to close within energy weapon range. Long-range kinetic bombardment, Cole observed, watching the tactical display with professional detachment. They're staying at maximum sensor range and launching projectiles in calculated salvos. The defense fleet can't even target them effectively at that distance. Sarah watched in horrified fascination as another galactic cruiser died. The kinetic projectile hit with such force that the ship's energy shields simply collapsed, unable to distribute the momentum of solid matter moving at nearly light speed. Secondary explosions rippled through the hull as the impact transferred its energy into heat and destruction. 17 minutes of engagement, she calculated, reviewing the battle data. 4 cruisers destroyed, 7 more with significant damage. The enemy hasn't taken a single hit. Standard galactic doctrine assumes energy weapon ranges, Cole explained. Close formations, coordinated shield harmonics, overwhelming firepower at distances measured in thousands of kilometers. But these projectiles are being fired from light minutes away. By the time anyone realizes they're under attack, evasive action is impossible. Their own ship hung in space several million kilometers from the main battle, sensors passively collecting data while remaining undetected. The stealth systems Cole had built into the reconnaissance craft were proving their worth against both sides of the engagement. The fleet's trying to close distance, Sarah observed as Admiral Korthak's remaining ships began accelerating toward the enemy formation. If they can get within energy weapon range, they'll be destroyed even faster, Cole finished. Closing distance just gives the enemy better targeting solutions. Watch. As if responding to his prediction, the enemy fleet adjusted their formation. The angular ships spread out in a three-dimensional pattern that maximized their firing arcs while maintaining safe distances from each other. When the galactic ships tried to concentrate their advance on a single point, they found themselves taking fire from multiple directions simultaneously. The cruiser Determination died in a cascade of explosions as 3 kinetic projectiles hit within seconds of each other. The escort vessels Valor and Defiance followed moments later, their hulls cracked open like eggs by impacts they couldn't hope to deflect. "This is Admiral Korthak to all remaining vessels," came the transmission over military frequencies. "Break formation and attempt individual targeting runs. Coordinate with your wingships for maximum." The transmission cut off as the Admiral's flagship took a direct hit to its command section. The massive vessel continued moving forward for several more seconds before its reactor containment failed and it vanished in a brief star. Sarah felt sick watching the systematic destruction of everything she had hoped to serve alongside. "Is there anything we can do?" "Not with conventional tactics," Cole replied, "but there might be another way." He began manipulating the sensor displays, focusing on detailed analysis of the enemy fleet's positioning and movement patterns. "They're fighting like snipers, which means they have to think like snipers." "What do you mean?" "Snipers are deadly because they can engage targets from concealed positions at ranges where retaliation is impossible. But they're also vulnerable in specific ways." Cole's fingers moved across the tactical interface, highlighting patterns in the enemy formation. "They have to remain stationary during firing sequences to maintain accuracy. They have to use predictable approach vectors to set up optimal targeting solutions. And most importantly, they have to assume their targets don't know how to shoot back." Sarah studied the data, her analytical mind beginning to see the patterns Cole was identifying. Their positioning is optimized for engaging large formations. They're maintaining distance based on galactic energy weapon capabilities, not kinetic weapon ranges. "Exactly. They know how to fight galactic fleets, but they don't know how to fight humans." Cole activated the ship's targeting systems, revealing capabilities Sarah hadn't known existed. "This ship carries 12 kinetic penetrators, human-designed and optimized for long-range precision engagement. Each one is essentially a miniature version of what they've been using against our people. 12 shots against 57 ships. We don't need to destroy their entire fleet. We just need to prove that someone can fight back." Cole's expression was grim with determination. "Sometimes the most important shot isn't the one that wins the battle. It's the one that shows everyone else how the battle can be won." As Cole began plotting firing solutions, Sarah found herself automatically falling into the role of spotter, a position she had never trained for but somehow understood instinctively. The principles were the same as individual marksmanship, just scaled up to interplanetary distances. "Target selection," she said, studying the enemy formation. Their command ship will be the most protected, but also the most valuable target. Range estimation, Cole continued. 4.7 light minutes. Projectile travel time approximately 12 minutes. Target will be moving, so we need to calculate intercept vectors based on predicted position. They worked together with an efficiency that surprised Sarah. Everything Cole had taught her about patience, calculation, and precision translated perfectly to space-based engagement. The only difference was the scale of distances and the complexity of orbital mechanics. Environmental factors, she reported. Solar wind patterns, gravitational influences from 3 major planetary bodies, residual electromagnetic interference from previous energy weapon discharges. Ammunition selection, Cole said, highlighting one of their kinetic penetrators on the targeting display. Dense metal core, minimal guidance package, maximum kinetic energy transfer. Same principles as a rifle bullet, just bigger and faster. As they refined their firing solution, Sarah noticed something that made her pulse quicken. They're positioning for another bombardment run, same formation pattern they used against the Academy. Cole nodded grimly, which means they'll be stationary for approximately 90 seconds while their targeting computers calculate optimal firing sequences. That's our window. The scope of what they were attempting hit Sarah with sudden force. One small reconnaissance ship, crewed by 2 humans, preparing to engage an entire alien fleet that had just destroyed the most powerful military formation in the sector. "Are we really going to do this?" she asked. "Yes," Cole replied without hesitation. "Because if we don't, everyone else dies thinking that resistance is impossible. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is prove that the enemy can bleed." They made final adjustments to their targeting solution as the enemy fleet moved into bombardment formation. Sarah watched the countdown timer as their projectile finished its automated pre-flight checks and prepared for launch. "Firing in 10 seconds, Cole announced. "After this shot, we'll be committed. Every sensor in the system will be looking for us." Sarah thought about the Academy recruits who had mocked her marksmanship scores. She thought about Commander Thaxian's dismissive comments and Zechthal's predictions of her inevitable failure. Most of all, she thought about every person who had ever told her she wasn't good enough. "Take the shot," she said. Cole's finger pressed the firing control, and their ship shuddered slightly as the kinetic penetrator launched from its tube. On the display, Sarah watched a tiny dot begin its 12-minute journey across space, carrying with it humanity's first answer to the alien assault. "Now we wait," Cole said quietly, "and we prepare for what happens next." As if summoned by his words, proximity alarms began sounding throughout their ship. Enemy sensors had detected the launch signature, and several of the alien vessels were already turning in their direction. "They know we're here," Sarah observed. "Good," Cole replied, beginning evasive maneuvers that sent their ship spiraling away from their firing position. "That means they're worried about what we just did." 12 minutes had never felt so long. Sarah watched the timer count down while enemy ships moved to intercept them, their angular hulls reflecting starlight as they adjusted course with predatory grace. At 8 minutes remaining, the first enemy projectiles launched in their direction. At 5 minutes, Cole began executing evasive patterns that pushed their ship systems to maximum stress. At 2 minutes, Sarah realized she was holding her breath. At 0, their kinetic penetrator reached its target. The enemy command ship had been positioning for another bombardment run when the human projectile arrived. Unlike the galactic vessels they had been destroying, this ship's defenses were optimized for energy weapon attacks. The solid metal penetrator, moving at a significant fraction of light speed, passed through their shields as if they didn't exist. The impact wasn't as spectacular as the explosions that had claimed the galactic fleet. There was no massive fireball or cascade of secondary detonations. Instead, the enemy ship simply stopped moving, its sleek hull suddenly dark and lifeless as the kinetic energy transfer destroyed everything inside. For several seconds, the entire battle seemed to pause. The remaining galactic ships stopped their retreat. The enemy fleet ceased their bombardment. Even space itself seemed to hold its breath as everyone processed what had just happened. Then Commander Zechthal's voice crackled across military frequencies, transmitted from one of the surviving escort vessels. "Unknown human vessel, this is Galactic Defense Ship Retribution. Did you just kill one of their command ships?" Sarah looked at Cole, who was grinning with the satisfaction of a marksman who had just made an impossible shot. Confirmed retribution. Enemy command vessel destroyed by long-range kinetic engagement. How, came Zechthal's incredulous reply. Cole activated their general broadcast system, sending his response to every ship in the battle zone. We fought like humans instead of trying to fight like everyone else. Sarah felt something electric run through her as the implications became clear. The enemy could be killed. Their weapons could be matched. The systematic slaughter could be stopped. But first, they had to survive the next few minutes as dozens of enemy ships converged on their position, intent on eliminating the one target that had dared to shoot back. The enemy response was swift and overwhelming. 18 ships broke from their formation and converged on the coordinates where Sarah and Cole's shot had originated, their angular hulls cutting through space with predatory determination. Kinetic projectiles began launching in calculated patterns, designed to saturate the area and eliminate any possible escape routes. Cole pushed their reconnaissance ship through evasive maneuvers that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size, using every trick of three-dimensional space combat to stay ahead of the incoming fire. But they both knew it was only a matter of time before the enemy's superior numbers and firepower found their mark. 12 more penetrators remaining, Sarah reported, monitoring their weapons' status while tracking enemy positions. But if we take time to line up shots, they'll destroy us before we can fire. Different tactics, Cole replied, his hands dancing across the control interface. We're not snipers anymore, we're guerrilla fighters. He activated systems Sarah hadn't known existed, revealing that their ship carried more than just long-range kinetic weapons. Smaller projectiles, designed for rapid deployment rather than maximum range, began deploying from concealed launchers. Scatter pattern, Cole explained as their ship shuddered under the recoil of multiple launches. Instead of one perfect shot, we saturate their formation with enough projectiles to force evasive action, make them react to us instead of dictating the engagement. The tactic worked better than Sarah had expected. The enemy ships, optimized for long-range precision engagement, found themselves struggling to maintain formation while avoiding the cloud of incoming projectiles. Their perfect firing solutions dissolved into chaos as captains chose individual survival over coordinated assault. But the success was temporary. Even as Cole's scatter pattern disrupted their formation, the enemy ships were adapting, using their superior maneuverability to reestablish targeting solutions. Within minutes, they would be back in position to resume their methodical destruction. That's when the rest of the Galactic Defense Fleet finally understood what they had witnessed. All vessels, this is Commander Zechthal aboard the Retribution, came the transmission on military frequencies. The human ship has demonstrated that the enemy can be engaged and destroyed using kinetic weapons. All ships with projectile capabilities coordinate targeting solutions and prepare for long-range engagement. Sarah watched in amazement as the surviving galactic vessels began implementing tactics they had never trained for. Emergency manufacturing systems worked to convert mining charges and construction materials into improvised kinetic weapons. Ships that had been running for their lives suddenly turned to face the enemy, seeking optimal firing positions for weapons they had barely considered military assets. It's working, she breathed, watching the tactical display as galactic ships began launching their own projectile attacks. The shots were crude compared to the precision weapons carried by the enemy fleet, but they served the same fundamental purpose, proving that retaliation was possible. The enemy formation, which had maintained perfect coordination throughout their systematic destruction of the Academy and fleet, began to show signs of strain. Ships that had operated with mechanical precision started making individual decisions, breaking formation to avoid incoming fire or seeking better defensive positions. They're thinking like a fleet instead of like snipers, Cole observed with satisfaction. The moment you start worrying about return fire, you lose the psychological advantage that made the tactic effective. But their own situation remained desperate. The 18 ships converging on their position had finally achieved targeting lock, and kinetic projectiles were incoming from multiple directions simultaneously. Even Cole's piloting skills couldn't evade fire coming from every possible escape route. Impact in 40 seconds, Sarah reported, watching the countdown timers with growing alarm. Multiple projectiles overlapping impact zones, we can't avoid them all. Cole's expression was grim but determined. Then we don't avoid them, we go through them. Instead of continuing evasive maneuvers, he suddenly accelerated directly toward the nearest enemy ship, using their own incoming projectiles as cover. The maneuver was so unexpected that Sarah didn't understand the logic until she saw the results on the tactical display. The enemy projectiles, fired to intercept their previous position, passed behind them as they accelerated toward the gap between two converging ships. The enemy vessels, programmed for long-range engagement, found themselves in the unprecedented situation of having a target approaching to point-blank range. They don't have close defense systems, Sarah realized. They never expected anyone to survive long enough to get within knife-fighting distance. Cole was already selecting targets, bringing their remaining weapons to bear on enemy ships that were optimized for everything except close-quarters combat. At ranges measured in thousands of kilometers instead of light minutes, their human-designed weapons had overwhelming advantages in accuracy and response time. The first enemy ship died to a kinetic penetrator fired from less than 50,000 kilometers away. At that range, there was no time for evasive action and no opportunity for defensive countermeasures. The projectile punched through their hull like it was made of paper, and the ship's internal structure collapsed under the transferred energy. The second ship tried to turn away, but its angular configuration was designed for maximum stealth and long-range firing capability, not maneuverability. Sarah watched Cole line up the shot with the same calm precision he had shown during their evening training sessions at range 7. "Breathe," she found herself saying, unconsciously echoing his lessons. "Steady pressure on the trigger." The shot was perfect. The enemy ship's command section vanished in a brief flash, and the vessel tumbled away into space, its hull intact but its crew compartment converted into superheated gas. Around them, the larger battle was transforming as galactic ships implemented the lessons learned from watching human tactics. Commander Zekthal's voice echoed across military frequencies, coordinating a general advance that used kinetic weapons to suppress enemy fire while smaller ships attempted close-range approaches. "Retribution to human vessel," came Zekthal's transmission. "Your demonstration has changed the tactical situation. Enemy formation is breaking down under coordinated kinetic bombardment. Request you continue close-range engagement while we provide fire support." Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction at the formal respect in the Velkari's voice. The same officer who had mocked her as hopeless was now requesting her assistance in saving the fleet. "Confirmed retribution," Cole replied, beginning systematic engagement of enemy vessels at close range. What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded galactic history. Instead of the traditional energy weapon exchanges that had defined space combat for millennia, the engagement became a three-dimensional dance of kinetic projectiles and precision targeting. Ships maneuvered not to achieve optimal shield harmonics, but to gain clear lines of sight for solid projectile weapons. The enemy fleet, caught between long-range bombardment from reformed galactic vessels and close-range assault from Sarah and Cole's reconnaissance ship, found their perfect tactical doctrine dissolving into chaos. Ships that had operated with mechanical precision began making desperate individual decisions, breaking formation to escape the unexpected opposition. "Enemy command structure is collapsing," Sarah reported, monitoring communication intercepts. "They're reverting to individual ship tactics instead of coordinated fleet operations." "Just like any other predator when the prey starts fighting back," Cole observed, lining up another shot on a ship that was trying to restore long-range firing position. "They're most dangerous when they think they're hunting, much less effective when they realize they're in a fight." The battle continued for another 37 minutes, but the outcome was decided in the first few moments when the galactic fleet proved that human tactics could work on an interplanetary scale. Ships that had been running for their lives became hunters, using improvised kinetic weapons to engage enemies that had seemed invincible minutes before. When the last enemy vessel finally retreated toward the outer system, the surviving galactic ships found themselves in possession of something they hadn't expected: victory. "All vessels, this is Commander Zekthal coordinating damage assessment and casualty reports," came the transmission. "Human reconnaissance vessel, please respond for fleet coordination." Cole activated their communication system, and Sarah realized that dozens of alien officers were about to hear her voice for the first time as a combat veteran rather than a failed academy recruit. "This is Sarah Chen aboard the reconnaissance vessel Longshot," she said, choosing a name for their ship on the spot. "Ready to assist with tactical assessment." There was a long pause before Zechthel responded, and when he did, his tone carried a respect that Sarah had never heard directed toward her before. "Specialist Chen, your demonstration of human kinetic warfare capabilities has saved this fleet, and possibly this entire sector. The Galactic Council will need comprehensive briefings on these tactics for implementation across all defense forces." Sarah looked at Cole, who was grinning with the satisfaction of a teacher whose student had exceeded all expectations. "Confirmed, Retribution will provide all necessary tactical analysis and training protocols." As they began coordinating with the surviving fleet elements, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been a struggling academy recruit whom everyone dismissed as hopeless. Her marksmanship scores had been embarrassing, her performance evaluations disappointing, and her future prospects limited to support roles. Now she was being asked to help rewrite military doctrine for an entire galactic civilization. "How do you feel?" Cole asked quietly while they prepared data files for transmission to the fleet. Sarah considered the question, thinking about everything that had changed. She was no longer the person who had trembled while holding a plasma rifle at the academy firing range. The woman who had been mocked as hopeless had become someone who could engage enemy fleets at impossible ranges and emerge victorious. "Dangerous," she said finally, echoing Cole's words from their first training session. Cole's almost smile appeared one more time. "Good, because this war is just getting started, and the galaxy is going to need every advantage it can get." Outside their ship, the stars looked the same as they always had. But Sarah knew that everything had changed in the space of a single battle. Humanity had proven that the galaxy's new enemies could be fought and defeated, but only by abandoning traditional tactics and embracing approaches that other species had dismissed as primitive. The girl who had been called hopeless had become the hope of civilizations she had never heard of, and somehow that felt exactly right. "Ready for the next lesson?" Cole asked. Sarah checked the status of their remaining weapons and began plotting courses toward the outer system, where enemy scouts were undoubtedly reporting the unexpected defeat to their main fleet. There would be other battles, harder fights, and challenges that would test everything they had learned. "I'm ready," she said. The stars ahead seemed full of possibilities rather than threats, and for the first time since joining the academy, Sarah Chen knew exactly who she was meant to be.